Every month, my grandmother made all the girls in our family line up for purity inspections on the kitchen table while she recorded the results in her leather ledger. When my 12-year-old cousin got her first period, I stepped forward at Eid dinner and said no, then found my dead sister's hidden evidence that would destroy 3 generations of family tradition. My family had one unbreakable rule. A daughter's purity was the family's most valuable currency, and it had to be verified monthly. I was 13 when I got my first period. My mother found me crying in the bathroom, and instead of comforting me, she just nodded and said, "Tomorrow morning then." I didn't understand what she meant until my grandmother arrived at dawn with her leather ledger. My mother and 2 aunts held me down on the kitchen table while my grandmother performed the first inspection. She recorded everything in that ledger with her perfect handwriting. Date, time, result. I passed, of course, but the humiliation burned through me like acid. Every month after that, the inspections continued. My grandmother would arrive with her ledger and her cold hands. My mother would make tea afterwards like this was normal. Like every family did this to their daughters. My older sister Amara wasn't so lucky. When she was 17, she failed an inspection. She'd been assaulted by our tutor, but that didn't matter to them. Within 48 hours, they married her off to her attacker. He paid the family $50,000 for damaged goods. After Amara left, the inspections got worse. They started happening weekly. My uncles installed cameras in our bedrooms to monitor us. My male cousins took shifts patrolling the hallways at night. They said it was for our protection, but we all knew better. The worst part was inspection day at family gatherings. All the women would line up youngest to oldest while my grandmother went down the line with her ledger. The men would sit in the living room drinking chai and discussing business while we endured our monthly humiliation. Afterwards, they'd praise our family for maintaining pure bloodlines. My uncle Rashid would always brag that his daughters had never failed a single inspection. I turned 18 the summer my cousin Fatima got her first period. She was only 11. I watched my grandmother mark her name on a fresh page of the ledger, and something inside me snapped. They were going to do this to her too. Every month for the next 7 years until they sold her to the highest bidder. That night, my grandmother pulled me aside and told me I was ready for the next level of responsibility. I would start training to conduct inspections myself. She handed me a medical textbook and told me to study the proper techniques. I stole more than just that textbook. Over the next few months, I collected every medical book I could find. I taught myself everything about anatomy and hymens and how meaningless these inspections really were. I learned that the whole thing was a lie designed to control us. I started teaching the younger girls in secret. We'd meet in the pantry during mealtime, and I'd explain how their bodies actually worked. I showed them diagrams and taught them exercises that could help them pass inspections regardless of what had happened to them. Knowledge became our weapon. The breaking point came during Eid dinner. My grandmother announced that Fatima would undergo her first family gathering inspection. She was 12 now and terrified. I watched her shake as she stood in line with the rest of us. When my grandmother reached for her, I stepped forward and said no. The entire room went silent. My father stood up from his chair and my uncles moved toward me, but I kept talking. I told them about the medical facts I'd learned. I explained how their entire system was based on myths. I said the word hymen out loud and watched my grandmother's face turn purple. My father grabbed my arm and started dragging me toward the locked room they used for punishments, but Fatima started crying and begging them not to inspect her. Then my cousin Sarah stood up and said she wouldn't do it anymore either. One by one, the younger girls joined us. The men didn't know what to do. They'd never faced resistance from all of us at once. My uncle started shouting about honor and tradition, but we kept refusing. My grandmother threatened to fail all of us in the ledger, but we didn't care anymore. That's when I played my final card. I pulled out my phone and showed them that I'd been recording everything. The inspections, the forced marriages, the money exchanging hands. I told them I'd already uploaded copies to the cloud, and if anything happened to any of us, the videos would go public. The chaos that followed gave us our chance. While the men argued about damage control and the women wailed about family shame, I gathered the younger girls and we ran. We piled into my hit-up Toyota Corolla and drove straight to the police station. The investigation took months, but they finally arrested my grandmother and several uncles, or so I thought. Turns out my family had connections I never knew about. I was forced to watch as, one by one, the charges were all dropped. That's when I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. I sat in my Corolla outside the courthouse watching grandmother exit smiling, and she mouthed, "You lose," while adjusting her hijab with the same hands that violated us. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The dismissal papers crumpled in my lap as I watched her climb into her Mercedes, the same car she'd driven to every inspection for the past decade. At the grocery store that evening, grandmother cornered me by the halal meat section. She leaned in close, her breath smelling like the tea she made after inspections, and whispered that Fatima's family was considering sending her to Pakistan for traditional education. My stomach dropped. I abandoned my cart and rushed to find my phone. My panicked call to Fatima's mother turned into a nightmare. She screamed at me for putting ideas in children's heads, while other shoppers stared at the hysterical woman attacking me through the phone. The store manager approached, asking if everything was all right. I hung up and fled to my car, leaving my groceries behind. My phone buzzed. Best friend Amina texted that she needed my grandmother's reference for nursing school and asked if I could move past the drama. My heart sank. Amina had been there through everything. She knew what grandmother did to us, but now she needed that reference letter, and family connections meant everything in our community. The clock on my dashboard showed 4:47 p.m. My shift at the women's shelter started at 5 o'clock, but Fatima's house was 20 minutes in the opposite direction. I had to choose. Racing to warn Fatima meant missing my shift at the women's shelter, choosing her safety over my job. I turned left instead of right. As I pulled onto Fatima's street, my heart stopped. Grandmother's car was already in the driveway. I parked 3 houses down and watched through my rearview mirror. Grandmother emerged from the house 40 minutes later, Fatima's parents walking her to her car with grateful smiles. They had no idea what they were agreeing to. While I was gone, grandmother visited the shelter. My supervisor called me that night, voice cold and professional. Apparently grandmother had spun tales of my mental breakdown and false accusations against loving family. The board was concerned about my stability around vulnerable women. 3 crises hit simultaneously the next morning. The eviction notice taped to my door cited missed rent payments during the trial. My bank account showed $47.23. Fatima's mother posted flight confirmations on Facebook, 2 weeks to Karachi, and Sarah's parents scheduled her engagement meeting for next Sunday with a 40-year-old businessman from Lahore. Desperation made me reckless. I started driving cousins to school to keep them from being taken to Pakistan, picking them up before their parents woke. joke, but this accidentally gave grandmother proof I was kidnapping family members. The school security footage from drop-off showed me ushering crying children into my car at 6 a.m. Grandmother had a genuine panic attack at mosque when discussing my betrayal. The entire congregation surrounded her with comfort and prayers. The imam's wife held her hand while she sobbed about how I'd torn the family apart. Nobody asked why I'd done it. They just saw an elderly woman in distress. My teenage cousin Yasmin started defending grandmother on social media. She posted old photos of grandmother teaching her to cook, braiding her hair, reading Quran together. The comments poured in about what a devoted, loving matriarch she was. Each photo felt like a knife in my chest. I noticed grandmother's ledger visible through her car window when she parked at the mosque. Today's date was already entered in her perfect handwriting, but I couldn't break in without violating the restraining order she filed. I tried to photograph it through the window instead. Security caught me crouched by her car with my phone. The guard, who'd known me since childhood, shook his head sadly as he escorted me off the property. To him, I looked exactly like the stalker grandmother claimed I was. The mosque board would hear about this. The next crisis came at the mosque daycare. They needed grandmother's signature to release Fatima's young brother. Policy required the registered guardian's approval. This gave her access to the family whenever she wanted. She made sure to time her visits when I was watching, smiling at me through the window. My therapist mentioned my behavior during our emergency session. She said it mirrored my response to father's death, suggesting I was projecting trauma. She leaned forward with practiced concern. Grief can manifest as anger at surviving family members, she explained. I wanted to scream that this wasn't grief, this was real, but I could see she'd already made up her mind. The WhatsApp family group became a battlefield. Every evidence screenshot I posted was countered with my old texts praising grandmother. They had years of messages where I thanked her for her guidance and wisdom. Nobody understood that I wrote those under duress, that we all did. The way she marks down these inspection results with her perfect handwriting makes me wonder if she truly believes she's protecting the family, or if there's something else driving her need for control over these young women's bodies. We learned early to perform gratitude. My cousin posted Ring doorbell footage of me lurking outside family homes. The timestamp showed 2 a.m. I'd been checking to make sure the girls were still there, not shipped off in the night, but on video, I looked deranged, peering through windows in my pajamas. Grandmother now controlled the family Zoom account needed for Sarah's online classes. She held her education hostage, changing the password mid-semester. Sarah's grades started slipping. Her teachers sent concerned emails that went unanswered. Another life grandmother was destroying while everyone watched. After 3 days without sleep monitoring Fatima's house, exhaustion caught up with me. I rear-ended someone at a red light. The police officer smelled distress and saw my bloodshot eyes. I failed the field sobriety test, stumbling over my own feet. The breathalyzer came back clean, but they arrested me anyway. Amina withdrew her support after her husband threatened divorce over association with a family destroyer. She met me at a coffee shop to explain, tears streaming down her face. I believe you but can't lose my marriage, she said. Her husband controlled their finances, their apartment lease, everything. I understood, but it still felt like betrayal. The local Pakistani grocery store owner pulled me aside during my next visit. Other customers were boycotting over the family shame I'd brought to the community. He asked me to shop elsewhere, apologizing profusely. Later, I found my photo posted in the community WhatsApp group with a warning about my mental instability. Digging through old documents, I discovered something horrible. Grandmother's claim about Amara choosing her marriage aligned with the marriage certificate she was forced to sign. Amara's shaky signature was witnessed by grandmother herself. The date showed Amara had just turned 18, 3 days after the assault. My best friend from childhood needed grandmother's connection for her daughter's private school admission. She called me crying, begging me to apologize to grandmother, to make peace. The waiting list was years long unless you knew someone on the board. Grandmother sat on 3 school boards. Proving the inspections were real meant revealing I let them continue for 5 years before acting. The questions came fast and harsh. Why didn't you save your sister? They asked. Why did you wait until after she died? I had no good answer. Fear had kept me silent. Shame had made me complicit. Yasmin saw me buying champagne at the liquor store. I was celebrating getting Fatima's visa expedited through a friend at the embassy, trying to get her out before her parents could send her to Pakistan. But Yasmin's Instagram post showed me partying while family suffers, bottles of alcohol in my cart while grandmother cried at mosque. The text exchange with grandmother made everything clear. She wrote simply, "Only one of us will survive this with reputation intact." I stared at those words until they burned into my retinas. She was right. In our community, reputation was everything, and she had a lifetime of goodwill built up while I had a few months of crazy behavior. Grandmother started tutoring Amina's daughter in Quran, creating genuine bonds while getting inside information. She taught her the same surahs she taught us, the same gentle voice that once comforted me during childhood nightmares. Amina's daughter began calling her Nani and asking when she could visit again. The betrayal cut deeper than any inspection ever had. During our next confrontation at the community center, I remembered things differently than the security footage later showed. In my memory, I'd been calm and collected. The video revealed me shouting, gesticulating wildly, looking every bit the unstable woman grandmother claimed I was. My own perception had become unreliable. While searching through old belongings in storage, I found my diary entries from years ago. Page after page praised grandmother's dedication to family purity before I knew better. The entries were being used in custody evaluations for Fatima. My own words from when I was 15 now condemned me as a hypocrite. Fatima's little brother innocently mentioned during a supervised visit that Nani says auntie is sick and needs help. He showed me a bottle of vitamins grandmother had given him, insisting I should take them. The child's genuine concern for my illness made my chest tighten. Even the youngest were being turned against me. The baby monitor app on Fatima's mother's phone had been streaming audio of me teaching escape routes to her daughter. Every word I'd said about running away, about finding safe houses, about recognizing abuse, all recorded and presented as evidence of my attempts to corrupt the children. Technology I'd taught them to use for safety became another weapon against me. Family services now treated my attempts to maintain contact with cousins as interference with parental rights. Each text message checking on their welfare was documented as harassment. Every drive past their schools was logged as stalking. The system designed to protect children was being weaponized to isolate them. I discovered my mother had been using her Amazon account to order books on escaping abuse. Hope flickered until I checked the browser history. She'd been researching daughter mental illness signs and how to get emergency psychiatric holds. My own mother was looking for ways to have me committed. Grandmother's Facebook posts about Western corruption of our daughters garnered hundreds of supportive comments. The comment section revealed an entire network of families who still practiced inspections. They praised her for maintaining traditions and called me a cautionary tale of what happens when girls get too much education. The imam was forced to testify about my visits to him. He reluctantly admitted I'd come to him, agitated and making accusations against elders. His testimony conveniently left out that I'd shown him medical evidence. He chose his congregation's peace over the truth. My attempt to record grandmother at the community center failed spectacularly. She spotted my phone immediately and began loudly praying for my healing from delusions. The entire room joined her in prayer while I stood there, phone in hand, looking exactly like the disturbed person she portrayed me as. School pickup deadlines became impossible choices. Following grandmother to monitor her access to Fatima meant missing work. Keeping my remaining part-time job meant leaving the girls unprotected. Each decision felt like abandoning someone who needed me. The shelter supervisor faced an anonymous complaint threatening their grant funding if they continued employing someone who attacked traditional family values. She called me in with tears in her eyes. I have 30 women depending on this shelter, she explained while handing me my termination papers. Grandmother's reach extended everywhere. Passing grandmother at the market, I noticed she wore my mother's sari, the same one mother had worn to Amara's forced wedding. The turmeric stains from the ceremony were still visible on the hem. Grandmother's eyes met mine as she adjusted the fabric, a calculated reminder of what happened to girls who failed inspections. Grandmother offered to let me apologize properly at the next family gathering. In exchange, she'd drop the protection order. The offer came through my aunt, who insisted it was generous given my behavior. When I refused, the family WhatsApp group exploded with messages about my pride preventing reconciliation for the children's sake. Studying the ledger photos I'd managed to capture revealed something horrifying. The symbols I hadn't understood indicated frequency. Some girls were inspected daily, not weekly. The abuse was worse than I'd ever imagined. My hands shook as I traced Amara's entry patterns, seeing the escalation in the months before her marriage. The medical textbooks made me realize Amara must have known the truth too. I searched her old belongings desperately, finding an iPod hidden in the lining of her jewelry box. My heart raced as I powered it on, discovering voice recordings dating back years. Amara had been documenting everything. Her recordings included grandmother genuinely crying about protecting family honor after forcing inspections. The complexity of grandmother's delusion became clear. She truly believed she was saving us from the fate that befell her own daughter, who'd run away decades ago and died on the streets. Trauma perpetuating trauma across generations. My mother faced an impossible choice between supporting me and maintaining access to grandchildren in Pakistan. Extended family threatened to cut all contact if she sided with a family destroyer. She sat in my car crying, repeating, "I can't lose everyone," until the words blurred together. Mother chose silence publicly, but slipped me keys to grandmother's storage unit during a brief hug at the mosque. Her eyes begged for understanding as she walked away. Inside the unit, I found decades of ledgers, photographs, and documents that painted a horrific picture of generational abuse. I began using grandmother's own inspection schedule against her, showing up wherever she planned to be. The cat and mouse game exhausted us both. Dark circles appeared under her eyes, matching my own. We were destroying each other in this war for the girls' futures. An accidental encounter with grandmother's lawyer at his daughter's soccer game let me gauge his loyalty. I mentioned knowing his client's real history, watching his face carefully. His discomfort suggested cracks in grandmother's legal armor, but he walked away without engaging further. Late-night access to the family's shared iCloud account yielded 3 years of inspection records before grandmother realized it existed. I downloaded everything frantically, knowing this digital evidence might be my only proof. The storage unit discovery is incredible. Mother secretly giving those keys while having to stay quiet publicly shows such brave love. Finding decades of ledgers and photos in there must feel like finally having real proof after all this time. The timestamps showed inspections happening during school hours, family celebrations, even religious holidays. Amara's husband emerged from Pakistan demanding compensation for his wife's death and her stolen belongings. He claimed the recordings were his property as her widower. Fighting him and grandmother simultaneously meant missing Fatima's parent-teacher conference, where her parents discussed sending her away. The school marked me as a negligent guardian in their records. Credit cards maxed out from legal fees while grandmother used mosque donations for her defense. The financial inequality felt crushing. She had community support funding her lawyers while I sold my furniture to pay for consultations. My Corolla became both transportation and bedroom. A confrontation at the grocery store where our family shopped before Amara's marriage traumatized the elderly staff who remembered her. They watched me chase grandmother through aisles, begging her to admit what she'd done to Amara. Security removed me while grandmother comforted the crying cashier who'd known Amara since childhood. My job loss at the shelter came with a final insult. My replacement was grandmother's niece. She moved into my office the same day, hanging family photos where my certificates had been. The women I'd been helping watched silently as I packed my belongings, understanding but unable to speak up. Sleeping in my Corolla outside the family home while grandmother hosted Quran study inside felt like a nightmare. Through the windows, I watched her teach young girls the same verses she'd taught us, knowing what would follow when they reached puberty. My helplessness tasted like bile. Father's text from his construction site in Dubai begged me to let the family heal. He wrote that mother cried every night, that the family was fractured beyond repair. His words accused me of causing more harm than grandmother ever had. The betrayal from someone who should have protected us burned worse than any inspection. My investigation inadvertently destroyed innocent lives. The Uber driver who'd helped drive girls to school faced trafficking investigations. His daughter asked why police came to school to question her father. His wife left him due to the stigma, taking their children. Another family shattered by my war against grandmother. The driver confronted me outside the mosque, tears streaming down his face. He'd only wanted to help, offering discounted rides to keep the girls safe. Now his reputation was ruined, his family gone. I had no words of comfort, only guilt that sat heavy in my chest. Despite knowing I was destroying innocent lives alongside guilty ones, I couldn't stop pursuing evidence. Each revelation pulled more people into the catastrophe. The web of complicity included teachers who'd noticed bruises but stayed silent, doctors who'd performed repairs, community leaders who'd known but chosen tradition over truth. Sarah asked during a vulnerable moment if the inspections were actually protecting them. The Stockholm Syndrome in her voice made me pause. I couldn't immediately refute her without sounding hypocritical. Hadn't I submitted for years too? The question haunted me as I watched her defend the very system traumatizing her. Publicly admitting to failing my own inspection at 15 became necessary to maintain credibility. credibility. The shame of revealing that private humiliation to the entire community felt like being inspected all over again. But if my truth could save even one girl, the exposure was worth it. The iPod recordings revealed my greatest failure. Amara had confided her fears about forced marriage months before it happened. In the recording, my younger self dismissed her concerns, telling her she was overreacting. Why didn't I listen? Became a mantra as I heard her frightened voice begging for help I didn't give. Grandmother's lawyer filed emergency motions to formalize custody of 3 cousins, while my lawyer was in court for another case. The legal maneuvering felt like a chess game where I was always 3 moves behind. Each victory grandmother achieved tightened the noose around the girls' futures. Watching grandmother cry at Amara's grave forced me to confront an uncomfortable truth. She genuinely believed she was protecting girls from Western corruption that had destroyed her own daughter. Her motivation mixed cultural trauma with a need to control female sexuality, stemming from her own forced marriage at 14. The realization that grandmother was also a victim didn't absolve her actions but complicated my hatred. She perpetuated what was done to her, trapped in a cycle she couldn't see. Breaking that cycle meant becoming someone Amara would hate, manipulative, calculating, willing to cause collateral damage. I found myself using the same manipulation tactics on Fatima's mother that grandmother used. Promises I couldn't keep, emotional blackmail about Fatima's future, exploitation of her maternal fears. The honest version of myself who'd trusted the system died as I planned increasingly desperate alternatives. Getting evidence meant befriending grandmother's youngest granddaughter, using her trust against her. I taught her the same body autonomy lessons I'd taught the others, but also carefully extracted information about grandmother's plans. Each betrayal of her innocence felt like losing another piece of my soul. Small victories felt hollow against mounting losses. Preventing one flight to Pakistan meant nothing when 2 other cousins disappeared from school. Finding evidence in the storage unit felt meaningless when judges wouldn't admit it without proper authentication. Every step forward came with 2 steps back. Seeing grandmother at Amara's grave became a twisted routine. We'd arrive at different times but somehow always overlapped, both hiding behind headstones, both mourning the same girl for different reasons. Neither of us could claim Amara's legacy while perpetuating the violence that culled her. Grandmother's counterclaim gained traction with a conservative mosque board. They saw my education, my job at the shelter, my Western ideas about bodily autonomy as evidence of corruption. The very knowledge that could save the girls was used as proof I was dangerous to them. Everything hinged on Fatima's mother testifying about her own inspection trauma. She wavered between protecting her daughter and maintaining family harmony. Her husband pressured her to stay silent while her daughter grew closer to inspection age. The weight of generational trauma pressed down on all of us. My past tutoring help for grandmother's grandson became unexpected leverage. He approached me at the mosque, confused why I wouldn't help his nanny like I'd helped him with mathematics. His innocent question cut deep. How could I explain I was trying to help by destroying the only version of love he knew? Female doctors in the community chose sides based on their own inspection histories. Those who'd endured them either became fierce allies or grandmother's strongest supporters. The divide revealed how deeply trauma could splinter perspectives, creating victims who became perpetrators and survivors who fought for change. The legal system's requirement for physical evidence of ongoing abuse, not past trauma, felt like another betrayal. Historical abuse wasn't grounds for emergency custody. Current danger had to be proven, but the inspections happened behind closed doors with family complicity. The law protected tradition over children. Contacting Amara's former teacher revealed another layer of failure. She'd helped Amara try to escape before the marriage, but was bound by mandatory reporting. She came to me for help, but I had to follow protocol, she explained, providing photos of Amara's bruises. Fear of community backlash kept her from testifying now. The teacher's revelation that Amara had been documenting the inspection process changed everything. She'd been planning to expose it all before her death. The timeline suggested her evidence gathering might have triggered the rushed marriage. My sister died a whistleblower, not just a victim. The teacher's revelation sent me racing back to her classroom after hours. She'd kept Amara's evidence cache hidden in a false bottom drawer for years, too afraid to act but unable to destroy it. My hands trembled as I lifted out notebooks, USB drives, and a sealed envelope marked "Open only if something happens to me." Amara's documentation reframed everything. Her death during childbirth at 19 suddenly seemed suspicious given the family's control over her medical care. The evidence showed she'd been gathering proof for months, interviewing other victims, recording conversations, photographing injuries. She died 3 days before her planned escape to a women's shelter. The USB drive contained hours of recordings. Amara's voice filled my car as I listened in the school parking lot. She'd documented her own inspections, the forced marriage negotiations, even grandmother's threats. One recording captured grandmother admitting she'd lied about Amara's intact status to preserve the family's reputation. I drove straight to the prosecutor's office, evidence clutched against my chest. The receptionist recognized me from my previous visits and sighed, but when I showed her Amara's death certificate alongside the medical records from her assault, her expression changed. She made a call, and within minutes I was ushered into a conference room. The prosecutor examined each piece of evidence methodically. Amara's notarized affidavit, witnessed by her teacher before her death, detailed years of abuse. Medical records showed injuries inconsistent with grandmother's sworn statements. Bank records traced payments from Amara's husband to our family accounts. The pattern of perjury became undeniable. While the prosecutor built the case, I focused on protecting the girls still at risk. Fatima's flight to Pakistan was scheduled for next week. Amara's teacher keeping evidence hidden for years makes me wonder about the real power dynamics here. She had proof that could have changed everything but chose silence over action. What kind of hold does this community have that makes teachers too scared to protect students they claim to care about? I spent my nights parked outside her house, watching for any sign they might leave early. My presence violated the restraining order, but I couldn't abandon her. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Fatima's mother called me at 3 a.m., whispering frantically. She'd found her daughter practicing self-harm to avoid the upcoming inspection. The sight of her child's desperation finally broke through years of conditioning. She wanted out but didn't know how. I met her at a 24-hour diner, choosing a booth in the back. She arrived wearing sunglasses despite the darkness, her hands shaking as she slid across from me. Through tears, she admitted her own inspection scars still hurt decades later. She'd convinced herself she was protecting Fatima by continuing the tradition, but watching her daughter's terror made her realize she was perpetuating the same trauma. Together, we developed an escape plan. She'd claim a family emergency required her to visit her sick mother, taking Fatima with her. Instead, they'd go to a domestic violence shelter in another city where I'd arranged temporary housing. The plan required perfect timing and absolute secrecy. The custody hearing arrived faster than expected, the courtroom filled with community members forced to choose between tradition and law. The women's section whispered anxiously while the men's section maintained stony silence. Grandmother sat at the defendant's table, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her hijab. I took my seat, compulsively checking the exits. Months of conflict had left us both exhausted. Dark circles shadowed grandmother's eyes, matching my own. We'd aged years and months, destroying ourselves in this battle for the girls' futures. Neither of us looked like winners. The prosecutor presented Amara's evidence systematically. Her written testimony, notarized by her teacher, described decades of abuse in clinical detail. The judge's expression grew increasingly grim as he reviewed medical photographs, inspection records, and bank statements showing payments for damaged goods. When Fatima's mother took the stand, the courtroom held its breath. She pulled back her sleeves, revealing old scars from her own childhood inspections. Her voice broke as she admitted believing she was protecting her daughter by continuing the cycle. The truth poured out, her own mother's inspections, the fear, the shame, the desperate need to believe it served a purpose. The family doctor who'd performed virginity repairs testified reluctantly. Faced with his own medical records, he couldn't deny the procedures he'd documented. Each false certification, each repair surgery, each medical lie told to preserve family honor. His license hung in the balance as he admitted to violating his oath for cultural expectations. Grandmother's breakdown came during cross-examination. Confronted with her own signed affidavits contradicting Amara's medical records, she began sobbing. Through tears, she insisted she'd been protecting us from the Western corruption that culled her own daughter. In her mind, the inspections prevented us from ending up dead on the streets like her sister who'd run away at 16. The complexity of her delusion became clear. She genuinely believed the inspections saved lives. Her own forced marriage at 14, her sister's death, the cultural messages about female purity, all twisted into a system of abuse she saw as protection. Trauma begetting trauma across generations, each woman convinced she was saving the next. The judge ordered psychological evaluations for all minor girls in the family, supervised visitation only, pending further review. The gallery erupted in whispers as he detailed the pattern of abuse, coercion, and perjury. Some families quietly left, perhaps recognizing their own practices in the testimony. During the sentencing phase, I was asked to provide a victim impact statement. I stood at the podium, looking at grandmother's tear-stained face. The prepared speech crumpled in my hands. Instead, I spoke about Amara, not just her death, but her life, her dreams of becoming a teacher, her secret poetry, her plans to help other girls escape. I requested mental health treatment instead of prison for grandmother. The words tasted bitter, but I knew Amara would want healing, not just punishment. Grandmother was both perpetrator and victim, trapped in a cycle she couldn't break alone. Prison wouldn't stop other grandmothers from continuing the practice. Only education and intervention could break the chain. The judge sentenced grandmother to house arrest with mandatory therapy. She'd served 2 years under supervision, attending counseling sessions focused on trauma and cultural abuse. The courtroom divided. Some felt justice was served, others believed she deserved harsher punishment. I felt only exhaustion. Temporary custody of Fatima and 2 other cousins was granted to me pending their parents' completion of counseling. The responsibility felt overwhelming. 3 traumatized girls looking to me for stability when I could barely keep myself together, but I couldn't abandon them to the system that had failed Amara. The community split in response to the revelations. Some families were appalled, genuinely unaware such practices continued. Others retreated deeper into tradition, viewing the legal intervention as Western interference. 3 other families were quietly reported for similar practices, their daughters suddenly withdrawn from school. I moved into a small apartment with my 3 wards. The first nights were hardest. Fatima's nightmares, Sarah's anxiety attacks, the youngest cousin's bedwetting. We were all broken in different ways, trying to build something new from the pieces. Some nights I sat in the bathroom crying, overwhelmed by the weight of their trauma and my own. Support came from unexpected sources. Former shelter co-workers connected me with resources. A therapist specializing in cultural trauma offered sliding scale sessions. Other survivor families reached out, sharing their own stories of escape and recovery. Slowly, we built a network of people who understood. The legal precedent established by our case began protecting other girls. Lawyers cited it when defending families who refused inspections. Medical professionals used it to refuse performing virginity tests. It wasn't a new law, but it was a crack in the wall of silence that had protected abusers for generations. Grandmother's therapy reports showed slow progress. She struggled to recognize the harm she'd caused, clinging to cultural justifications. But occasionally, breakthrough moments occurred. She'd admitted to her therapist that she still had nightmares about her own inspections at 14. The cycle of trauma ran deeper than any of us had imagined. I returned to Amara's grave alone one evening. The headstone felt cold under my palm as I told her about the trial, the custody, the small victories, and daily struggles. I apologized for not listening when she'd tried to warn me, for not saving her when I could have. The guilt would never fully fade, but I was learning to carry it. Working with lawyers, we established protocols for identifying and preventing cultural medical abuse. It wasn't perfect. Many families would continue in secret, but pediatricians now had guidelines for recognizing signs. Teachers had resources for supporting affected students, and girls had legal precedent protecting their bodily autonomy. The inspections in our family ended, but the healing had just begun. Each therapy session revealed new layers of trauma. Each nightmare, each panic attack, each moment of progress reminded us how far we'd come and how far we still had to go. Recovery wasn't linear. It was messy, painful, and sometimes felt impossible. 6 months later, I enrolled in social work courses while managing the girls' schedules. Fatima joined the debate team, finding her voice through structured arguments. Sarah discovered art therapy, painting her emotions when words failed. The youngest started sleeping through the night without accidents, small victories that felt monumental. Grandmother sent a letter through her lawyer, not an apology exactly, but an acknowledgement. She wrote about her own grandmother, the inspections going back generations, each woman believing she was protecting the next. She was beginning to understand the harm, though she still struggled with letting go of tradition completely. Some bridges remained burned. Extended family members who'd supported grandmother still refused contact. My parents struggled to rebuild their relationship with me while maintaining ties to Pakistan. The community remained divided, some viewing me as a hero, others as a destroyer of culture. I was neither, just a woman who'd said no and lived with the consequences. The girls still struggled with physical affection, flinching at unexpected touches. Trust came slowly, built through consistent actions and kept promises. We developed our own traditions. Friday movie nights, Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday walks in the park, new rituals to replace the traumatic ones, creating a chosen family from the ashes of the old. Amara's evidence had saved us, her posthumous courage achieving what her living voice couldn't. The inspections ended not with dramatic confrontation, but with quiet legal precedent, therapeutic intervention, and the slow work of healing generational trauma. Justice came through paperwork and patience, not revenge. I kept grandmother's ledger as evidence and reminder. Sometimes I traced the entries, seeing the pattern of abuse across generations. Each name represented a girl whose body was violated in the name of honor. The ledger that once controlled our lives now served as testimony to what we'd survived and overcome. The healing was far from over. Trauma didn't disappear with legal victories or custody papers. It lived in our bodies, our reactions, our daily struggles to feel safe. But we were building something new, imperfect, difficult, but ours. The inspections had ended, the recovery continued, and somewhere Amara's spirit could finally rest, knowing her evidence had protected the sisters she'd died trying to save. Thanks for letting me join you through all these moments. Until next time, friends.